Sport now, as the Springbok Women will make their historic debut at the Cape Town Stadium this afternoon, marking a pivotal moment in their rugby journey. Led by captain Nolusindi Soboy, the team is eager to match the occasion with a strong performance against the formidable Barbarians. Their match will be followed by the Freedom Cup decider between the Springboks and the All Blacks at the same venue. Our reporter Khotso Sello is live in Cape Town. Khotso, good to speak to you this afternoon. A feast on the rugby menu for the people in the mother city. How's the spring vibe? Can see from where you are that it seems to be like an absolutely glorious day.
It's a peach of a day, Hugo. Yesterday when we arrived in Cape Town, it was bitterly cold. The wind was at about 23 kilometers per hour. But today, almost, tip-top conditions for some running rugby. The sun is out and the people are out in their numbers. But I think the most critical thing, Hugo, is the fact that the women's match is the curtain raiser to the Springbok versus the All Blacks. I think from a men's perspective, we need to do all we can in terms of supporting women's rugby. And the rugby is starting nice and early. The kickoff in that Barbarians versus Springbok women's game is at 1:30 this afternoon. So in a little bit, about 15 minutes time, that kickoff will be happening. And as you can see, the people are trickling in. The picturesque Table Mountain in your view. And a lot of people in their Springbok green and gold jerseys as well. And as you know, Cape Town is a kind of city that allows for people to kind of walk and, absorb the atmosphere. There isn't much car traffic as opposed to Johannesburg and Pretoria, more in the Highveld, where you'd see a lot of congestions when it comes to cars. But in Cape Town, the people have, got their parking spots, and the city is very much user-friendly to the people who are walking. There's people of all ages, young and old alike. But as you know, the All Blacks have a huge following in this part of the world, and they're also out in their numbers. They're also draped in their black All Black jerseys. When I walked around in the hotel room that we were staying in this morning, we were met by a lot of All Black supporters driving all the way from different parts of the Western Cape, the Paarl, as well as Stellenbosch, making their way, filling the hotels in Cape Town. And I think the weather is playing party to what is expected to be a festive rugby day, where we do anticipate the Springboks hopefully doing one over the All Blacks, the All Rivals. It is the Freedom Cup, and it's been 30 years of freedom on South African soil.
Now we've talked a little bit, Khotso, about the turnout. You've indicated that the people the fans are trickling in. Do we expect a full crowd for the Barbarians versus the women's team earlier on, or do you kind of expect that people will start to come in at roundabout when that match starts and fill up ahead of that all-important encounter this afternoon?
I think South Africans always want an excuse to come have a braai, come have a jol at the stadium, and having a curtain raiser certainly gets people up and about quite early. I think at the hotel room, the people were already out of that breakfast hall at about 8 o'clock this morning, showing the willingness to be here at about 11, 12 o'clock to be some of the first people here to witness that women's Springboks versus the Barbarians match. It will not be a full house, I can guarantee you that, but it will be more or less about a 20 to 30% crowd that will be supporting them. But it also makes it much easier in terms of making sure we don't experience things like stampedes that we saw at Ellis Park in the early 2000s. And just getting the crowd here a little bit earlier makes a huge difference, but also introducing that women's sport, that women's rugby to the general public. We do know that earlier in the year, the Bulls were the first franchise to actually give women full-time contracts. And we also saw them doing a curtain raiser for the women's final, Currie Cup final, which was between the Western Province and the Bulls Daisies. That happened at Loftus Versfeld. On that day, the men's team were actually the curtain raisers to the women's game. So SA Rugby working hand in glove with the women's game to make sure that the game extends beyond racial lines, but more importantly beyond gender.
So we've talked about the encounter this afternoon, which is the All Blacks and the Boks. Now, in your opinion, who's under more pressure, the All Blacks to obviously not lose 2-0, or for the Springboks, who are on the verge of history, if I'm not mistaken, if they can make it 4 on the trot?
It's a very interesting time in terms of All Blacks rugby. They've been at the pinnacle of world rugby. They've been at the summit for a very long time. And right now, you know, it feels almost like a power shift between the two nations. And there's so much that relates between the All Blacks and the Springboks, you know, whether it's politically or whether it's rugby-wise. And rugby has played such an important tool in both our societies in terms of shaping how our society looks like. We do know in New Zealand that the Maori rugby took quite a long time before they were accepted as a nation, and they were, you know, allowed to mix with their white counterparts. The same thing here in South Africa, you know. So there's so many similarities between the two countries, but the only difference today is that shifting of power. You know, will the Springboks eventually wrestle that power and go on top of the All Blacks and perhaps dominate rugby for the next 10 or 15 years to come? You know, looking at the types of squads and depth that South Africa has, or will the All Blacks, despite going through some sort of a sour patch, be able, you know, to come out unscathed against, you know, what is touted to be, or what is, you know, billed to be the Springbok team that will take a step forward into a bright future. Siya Kolisi was very vocal yesterday. He didn't want to be tempted in terms of, you know, records that need to be broken and all sorts of stuff, you know, those ego-tripping stats. But he says the most important thing is for South Africa to win the Freedom Cup in the 30 years of freedom in this country.
Khotso Sello, I appreciate your time. We will speak to you again this afternoon and give us an update on what's transpired in that Barbarians versus Springboks Women, and obviously in build-up to that all-important encounter. You're watching News.